I'm Andrea Chilcote, executive coach, lifelong leadership student, and author of What Leaders Need Now. Welcome to my leadership podcast. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to attend a webinar entitled Unlocking Feminine Wisdom, Honoring Your Natural Rhythm to Maximize Your Strengths. And it had some very thought-provoking topics for both women and men. The hosts, Taryn, Laasko, and Cynthia graciously agreed to be guests on today's podcast. Let me read their bios. Taryn Laasko earned a bachelor's in psychology from the University of Washington and is a certified CTI coactive coach, accredited through the International Coaching Federation, and is one of the first 20 coaches in the world to be certified as a positive intelligence mental fitness coach. In 2020, Taryn left behind a 20-plus year career in HR and technology, as she says, to fully pursue a career that ignited her passion and create a living that inspired rather than tire me out. I love that, Taryn. Taryn brings the wisdom she gained from her real life, from balancing the demands of raising two daughters as a single mom, holding a full-time job, earning her coaching certification, and launching her own successful business. She's committed to helping clients unlock their amazing potential and discover their own unique personal strengths so that they can successfully navigate life's transitions and live full and authentic lives. Taryn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrea.
Cynthia is a neurodivergent creative coach who's dedicated to holistic well-being and burnout prevention. After 25 years in small business sales, marketing, and operations, she pivoted her career to coaching and consulting. Cynthia is focused on supporting others through their integrative wellness journey, leveraging her expertise in unlocking the collective wisdom from groups such as Exchange Guide, Positive Intelligence, Mental Fitness, and Emotion Code. Her goal is to help people fully integrate the mind, body, heart, and soul to meet professional and personal goals while enjoying their work, relationships, and life to the fullest. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you, Andrea.
One of the things that I'm keenly interested in is the high degree of burnout we're seeing in the workplace. And I've been interested in this throughout my career, but most keenly interested in it since the pandemic. And we all see all of the surveys and all of the stats, and they're not getting any better. And SHRM just released their research series, their 2024 research series. They released it for Mental Health Awareness Month in May. And I found a couple of numbers that I thought were once again stunning. So 44% of the 1,405 people they surveyed, U.S. employees, feel burned out at work, 44%. 45% feel emotionally drained from their work, and 51% feel used up at the end of their workday. Now, in my last podcast, among many other topics, my guest and I talked about burnout in a different context than we're going to talk about it today. We talked about the idea of unfulfilling work and how that contributes to burnout and how leaders don't often acknowledge that. And the survey talked about that as well. They said 50% of employees feel a sense of belonging and 40% often feel fulfilled. And I thought that was stunning as well, that so 50% feel like they belong in their workplace. That means 50% don't, and 60% don't feel fulfilled. So there's this whole idea of the work we do. And then there's also this emotionally drained and used up. And I'm so interested in the work the two of you are doing because you seem unafraid to say that we can't do it all of the time at top speed. And in the workshop that I did with you, I walked away with a worksheet that says at the top, you are not a machine. And I'd love to hear your perspective on burnout in the workplace, the result it's having. Taryn, can you go first? I'm going to stop talking and let you talk.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Wow, those statistics. I mean, 50% are feeling burned out and they don't want to be doing what they're doing. Like, how is it that 50% of our workforce is not feeling fulfilled, or 40% of them? And that graphic that we shared in that workbook, I want to give credit to Adam Grant on that one. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, we're not machines. We're human beings. And yet we're sitting in this world of doing, but we're not really being with our emotions, our thoughts, our relationships. And so our burnout is because we are so disconnected on who we are. The results are we're really seeing increases in decline of our well-being, like whether it's our physical well-being, our mental well-being, but the stats of increasing heart rate, heart disease, anxiety, depression among all generations, not just baby boomers, but Gen X, millennials. We're all being impacted by this machine mentality around we have to do the same thing every day in the same way without being able to fluctuate and take breaks and take rests.
You said we're disconnected from who we are.
Yeah.
Why? That I'm also keenly interested in. Why is that? Why can't we be who we are? Why don't we know who we are?
It's a really good question. I think because we're disconnected because we're trying to fit in this box of what we think society wants us to be, rather than knowing what we want from the inside. So we're letting external expectations drive us versus our internal desires supporting us and driving us. Like, how many of us know what our values are and aligning to that as we make decisions?
Yeah. Cynthia, can you comment on burnout?
I'm having a visceral response to how many of us know what our values are. That's a really great question because I think ignoring or not being aware of what our values are and being aligned with them is a key contributing element to this burnout epidemic, and all this, it supports the stats that you just referenced, Andrea. And this disconnection to our bodies is a huge disservice to us. And I just think it's compounding that, because we are human beings first, not human doings. And there's always going to be this giant to-do list, always. And the question that I often ask myself and others is, what can keep? What'll keep? What will still be there if you take a pause for a moment for yourself and just add this element of nurturing for yourself? Likely everything will still be there. But the awareness around it is really what we're missing. It's we show up every day with this heavy load of expectations, mostly from ourselves. We put that load there because we aren't aware that there's really any other way. So getting out of this mindset that we are part of a machine or we are a machine is really key. Like, how can we look at this piece that's missing, which is that we are humans first, and we're made for connection to ourselves, connection to each other. And from that place, we get a lot of inspiration and energy when we honor this piece of us that's there.
Taryn, to build on that, and to build on something you said about cycles and rhythms, I'm intrigued by your garden metaphor and the use of seasons as archetypes in coaching. And, we can't do it all at once. And that's something, when I first met you, you talked about your work with with gardening and coaching. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we can do it all at once and sustain a level of productivity always.
Right. Well, nature is so informative to us, and the more we are in these corporate structures, the metal, the containers in which we show up and go to work in, we become more disconnected to what Mother Nature is letting us know, that we have seasons of energy. So in the winter time, are we resting enough? Because that is what the world is doing. In wintertime, it's fallow, it's quiet, it's reflective, it's snuggled in, it's in hibernation mode. And yet, we as a society are still thinking we need to be doing the same level of output that we are doing in the summer, or what we call it the summer season of our life. This high output, high production, massive amounts of growth. Like if anyone's looking and in the northern hemisphere right now, and you're looking outside, it's a summer energy. There's things that are growing and blooming, but that's not year round. There are times when we are in that fall season where it's a little quieter, more reflective, where we more need to assess and we're harvesting what everything has been grown. But we start judging ourselves because we're not in that same output mode that we might have been in the prior season of summer. And so when we start looking at our different seasons of our life, whether it's annually or over a lifetime, or for women on a monthly basis, we have ebbs and flows in our energy. And we can start learning and embracing nature's wisdom to inform of our own wisdom around our energy.
A hard lesson to learn sometimes.
Yeah. It's contrary. In the wintertime, I'm like, oh, my mind says I should be doing all of these things, but my body is telling me something different. I need to be resting more, having a quiet moment in front of the fire with a cup of tea. And that's actually going to be most nurturing. And my intuition now has the ability to come online because I'm in a quieter space.
Mm-hmm. I want to share a story, and I want to ask Cynthia for some input on this. I have a client who, an executive team of very driven people in a mission-oriented function, and they are busy, their work is important, they have a sense of belonging, a sense of being fulfilled. And they had I was doing interviews with each of them before an executive team session, and they have a new HR lead. And she wanted to add a question to the interviews. What do you do do you have a self-care practice, and what is it? And this was 9 people. And so I was very curious. I thought, 9 people, what would you guess out of 9 people, how many would have that of these busy executives? My guess would be maybe 30%, maybe 50% would be great. Every single person had one. They were diverse. They were consistent. They weren't, I get a massage once a month, which I'm not by any means suggesting a massage once a month is a problem. I love a massage once a month. But that is not what I consider a self-care practice. That's not a sufficient self-care practice, in my view. It's part of a practice, but these folks had very deliberate practices, and it worked into their lives, and one person's wouldn't work for another person's. So, Cynthia, can you comment on that and what you've seen? How would you advise someone who said, I don't know what to do? Self-care, I get all this, and I'd love to honor those seasons, and I'd love to honor myself, but I don't even know where to start.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Andrea, I'm encouraged by the story you just shared. Oh, that just lights me up. So I'm excited that we're making some progress in this area of self-care being a piece that leaders have awareness about. So what I would say where to start is really to start small. I think many of us understand or have heard of a circadian rhythm where you've got like a 24-hour energy cycle. And when you take that concept, there's another one called an ultradian rhythm, which is a 2-hour energy cycle. So if we can just take that 2-hour time frame and set a timer on our watch or our phone or whatever method we use and take a 2-minute break every 2 hours, that's a very simple self-care practice that can keep you resourced and keep you in a high performance mode. Even Microsoft did a study on this, on what regular breaks can do and how it keeps you calm, keeps you focused, keeps your cortisol level low. So you're not having this stress response. And then what happens is we go home at the end of the workday and we're able to connect with people that we care about in a more meaningful way. And so I really think that this is the smallest little antidote to where to start with self-care, like, because it can feel overwhelming. And this can be a practice that is easily implemented by anyone. We can all do it. It's just a choice.
Beautiful. So it's easy to blame. I also found myself having a conversation with a colleague a couple weeks ago, and we both said, what a week. We feel like we're taking on all of these problems that our clients have, and they're heavy, they're big. And I found myself thinking, they're big, and so many of them are self-imposed. And they're real, but they're self-imposed. And we want to help them get through that. And yet we want to blame our boss, we want to blame the company culture, we want to blame the economy. But people are making choices to stay in the lives that they're in and stay in the jobs that they're in and stay in the situations that they're in. And you both do some really fascinating work, this positive intelligence work, around the internal critics we all seem to have inside of us, which you call the saboteurs. And I wouldn't want to end this conversation without talking about that. It's fabulous work. And can you both talk about that? Maybe Taryn and then Cynthia, talk about how that impacts your coaching work, how that impacts this topic we're talking about. Taryn?
Well, to what Cynthia was saying earlier, those 2-minute breaks, positive intelligence framework is really the foundation, the ground level basement work, where when we notice we're hijacked by these inner critic thoughts, we can pause and then we notice, oh, these inner thoughts. I'm sure all of us have had something like this at one time or another, where we start thinking, I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough, I'm an imposter, judging ourselves and judging others, judging our boss, like you were just saying, Andrea, like, oh, my life will be better if. So all of these type of stories that our minds are making up, when we pause long enough to know we're in the story of our mind of making things feel worse than they actually are, we can intercept it. We can take a pause and go, well, what's actually true about this? And make a different choice. How do I want to show up in relationship to this? And so the framework of positive intelligence allows us to name these parts of ourselves, whether it's hyperachiever or an avoider thought, or the primary, most brutal inner critic is our inner judge. Our judge is judging ourselves, judging others, or judging our circumstances. And when we can pause and take ourselves out of this negative spiral of thoughts, we can choose how we want to be in relationship with ourselves and others, and start accepting, like, okay, yes, this is my situation, and maybe there's something else out there for me. Being at choice. That's really at the root of it, but we have to pause long enough to recognize that we're in that situation.
Yes. And be at choice.
Choice.
Yes. So specifically, Cynthia, if one is focusing on self-care, how do the saboteurs show up?
Uh, Great question. Oh my gosh, what a show that they can create. When it comes to self-care, I think the first one that shows up is the avoider, because the avoider can create all kinds of to-do lists and then go, oh, I don't want to do that. So when it comes to self-care, I can speak for myself. The avoider goes, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to plan this 2-minute break for myself. And then when the 2-minute break comes, the avoider goes, oh, that's not that important, I'm going to go over here. It's just easier to stay in my normal focus. And so the story that the avoider creates is that, it's just not that important anymore, even though it might be, because in that moment, you can make a choice and notice that the avoider is trying to derail you from what you actually truly want to do. So that's one element. The other one is hyperachiever. Oh my gosh, I was talking with Taryn just earlier today about when the hyperachiever is in the primary seat in creating these stories, it wants to better my own best. So that's the bar that I've got to continually raise, raise, raise. So if I'm focusing on my health and well-being and I want to lose weight, for example, well, I lost 2 pounds last week, I've got to better that this week. So it's just it's this awful place to be, because these inner critic thoughts are not you, but they're driving what it is that we're doing or not doing. So that key piece that Taryn was just talking about, pausing and noticing that it's an inner critic thought, it's a story that's being created, and then choosing a different way.
Beautiful.
So those are just 2 examples, and there's many more, but when it comes to self-care, the inner critics can really derail very easily.
As coaches, our job, we work with leaders, and leaders can create many different ways that organizational culture can change, that lead to engagement and mitigate workplace burnout. But when it really comes down to it, these things we're talking about are about us and the individual and what we can do inside of us, and make the choices. And sometimes we have to make choices moment by moment about our thoughts and managing our thoughts. And the thoughts lead to the actions that we take. If you had to leave us with one brief piece of advice going forward around this topic, each of you, what would it be?
Well, 2 words came up for me that was different than what I had thought I was going to share, was self-authority and self-compassion. So how do we have self-compassion for ourselves when we start going into this spiral of negative thoughts, either for ourselves or for others? So compassion, I think, is the first tip I'd want to share, is we are good enough as we are today. And then stepping into our self-authority around, here's what I can do to change that. So compassion, authority, and it starts with self.
I love that. Thank you. Cynthia, what about you?
I think that what's coming up for me is this counterculture, counterintuitive thing that's slow down to go fast. So I think that we often go, well, we look at our calendar and there's a little gap, so we've got to put more things in there in order to get lots of things done. And what we know to be true is that by slowing down and taking pauses and listen to our minds, listen to our bodies, listen to our hearts, we can make better decisions and have more energy around them because they're aligned to our values. So just like that, setting the timer, it seems counterintuitive because you're taking time out, right, for 2 minutes every 2 hours. And yet it ignites the best parts of ourselves. So that way we can be at our best at all time. So just moving our bodies, changing the environment, intently listening on something for a couple minutes. So all of these things seem like we're slowing down, but it's actually so we can be more productive and more connected to each other and show up with what matters most to us.
I love that. And when you said slowing, it feels like we're slowing down. It's not just about losing 2 minutes, which we all know we've got an extra 2 minutes. It's about what that 2 minutes gives you, and slowing down to have a conversation, slowing down to listen, slowing down to be present. We think we can multitask. What a important message that you're leaving with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for those of you listening or watching, thank you for being part of this conversation. If you're interested in hearing more about Taryn or Cynthia's work, connect with Taryn Laasko and Cynthia Jean Maloney on LinkedIn. Be sure to subscribe to my podcasts on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button below, or go to my website, whatleadersneednow.com, to see our library of past episodes. Thank you for joining us, and be well.